All right. And we are live. Good to see you today, my EOS Podcast friends. Today, we are talking about NFTs. There's some cool new information here that Bohdan and Roman are going to tell us from Crypto Lions, and a big thought to put out to the community. So we're going to talk about non-fungible tokens, digital assets, and what that ownership authority really means for digital assets. So as we move forward, this is important for everyone to know about. Welcome to the EOS Podcast. This is the home of the Mr. Happy Money Proxy as well. So welcome to the show, Bohdan, and welcome to the show, Roman. Go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Hello, I'm founder of Crypto Lions. Here is my friend and co-founder Roman. And yeah, today we'll talk about non-fungible tokens and simple assets.
All right.
I think Bohdan is a genius. The community hears more often from me because I'm a native speaker. But what we will talk about today, digital assets, that's been all his passion. It seems like he fell in love with the idea, and through him I fell in love with the idea. And we built a non-fungible token standard. When we started working on it, we thought it was the non-fungible token standard, but we've learned about a couple other players in the course of these 2 months. But regardless of which standard people like, I think there's an important concept for the community. And we really want your help getting it out there. We think we need a little philosophical discussion.
Yeah, this is a really cool discussion. You just wrote a paper about it as well on Medium, so we'll put the link to the digital assets paper in Medium as well. But I hadn't really thought this deeply about it until I read your paper, and it is a big idea. So why don't you tell us who the digital asset players are, who's created these non-fungible token standards so far, and then what the kind of base idea is?
Well, there is us, where we built simple assets, free, open source, awesome. After we started working on simple assets, after we had a working prototype, we learned about D-goods from Mythical Games. We think Mythical Games we think they're awesome. We think they're going to bring a lot of new people to the EOS ecosystem. It turns out we have sort of rival standards now, but it'll be fine. ITAM, great Korean game developers, they put out their ITAM standard. And there's a project called Unico EOS. And that's the fourth one that I'm aware of. And I think it's great. I think it's very early, and now is the time for sort of experimentation, for trying different things. And in the end, the developers will decide.
Yeah, so the D-good standard and the ITAM standard I'm familiar with. I've talked to them about that. Who's Unico EOS involved? Are they involved with the project, or are they just building the standard standalone?
I know about them through Telegram and through their GitHub. It seems like this is their only focus, but I don't know if it's connected to a bigger business plan or not.
Okay. So you split the digital assets. I think an easy way to explain it, you have split it into 4 levels of digital assets. So talking about the most basic level to where we're going with digital assets. So you want to step through that kind of to give people a base of what we're going to talk about here?
Yeah, well, this is just sort of trying to figure out what digital assets are. I mean, it was hard enough to figure out what cryptocurrencies are. It still is. So it's really early in the life of digital assets. And I put out what I think is just a way to look at it. Like when I was playing Doom 2 as an adolescent, the chainsaw was kind of like a digital asset. It was a definite object. I had control of it. I decided how it was used. Granted, that was within the confines of the game, but that a digital asset? Probably the next step up is when you start trading those digital assets on third-party exchanges. This was also non-blockchain functionality. For example, skins, a famous marketplace, OP Skins. You traded video game skins. It was a huge, huge market. And in fact, I think our very own Brendan Bloomer and Brock Pierce were involved in that. And no crypto there, just objects from video games existing outside the video game in a market. Okay, so then we get blockchain. The simplest way for a digital asset to be expressed on blockchain is the way that it's expressed in the lovely little game EOS Knights. Transactions of items inside of EOS Knights are transactions on the blockchain. So you can sort of verify authority. You can see a history of what happened, and that history exists outside the game. All right, but they're not like discrete chunks of digital information that transfer control. It's all within the game logic. It just pushes sort of transactions onto the blockchain to verify it. All right, the next step is that you do have these discrete chunks of digital information, and they're sort of a protocol. So you could send these chunks. You could send these chunks to a marketplace, and they're on the blockchain, and we're looking really strong here. It's already blockchain stuff. But here's what the community needs to know. Because it's blockchain, there may be this misconception that the ownership of this digital chunk is sort of as strong as your ownership of a Bitcoin or of an EOS token. And that's not the case at all, because the person who issues these chunks can update their contract and change whatever they want and do all kinds of stuff. If they were malicious or if they were just converging incentives, economic incentives. There are games that have been criticized, like Red Dead Redemption, for messing with the game economics, and they upset a bunch of players like that. So there are these converging interests. So I think there's one more step that the community needs to be aware of, and these are different expressions of what I would like to call ownership authority. If you deploy the game that issues assets and you deploy the logic that issues assets, you can do whatever you want. And ownership of that asset is not as strong as ownership of EOS or Bitcoin. The way to do it, and I think that's fine for a lot of use cases, I'm not against that, but there is a sort of a stronger implementation, and that is having the asset contract exist independently of the game, have the asset contract only updatable by a group of responsible parties through a multisig, and then games appeal to this external contract to deploy their assets. I can state that again more briefly. We think that at the highest level, a digital asset is like a promise. It is a promise from the people creating the asset to the first owner and to all the possible future owners. It is a promise that you guys, you owners, will decide control, and I will only update the asset in this little part of the asset that I designated as updatable. That's the essential promise that a digital asset should be in its highest expression.
Okay, yeah, that's so when it comes down to it, we're not quite there. We're at that highest promise yet, but we're at this influx point where we're hoping to make that happen. So let's give people a real clear understanding of it, and let's kind of step through each of those 4 steps and spend just a moment on each step to give people a clear idea of the different levels we're talking about, and kind of so we can get to what this final promise is, or what we need to be thinking about philosophically as we move forward. So you said level 1 is like a doom gun. So basically it's just a chunk of digital information where people control it inside the game. So this is what we've had historically, right? With people owning skins and people owning weapons and things of that nature within games. What we're hoping here is that blockchain steps in and gives people actual ownership, so that if the developers come in and change the code, that you don't lose your digital assets. And I guess you mentioned Red Dead Redemption had some problems with this. Is what else do you have to add on? I mean, is that a pretty good description of what level 1 digital assets are, what we know and what we know now?
Yeah, I think the skins is kind of 1.5. And
okay.
Maybe I should go edit that, because level 1 is no blockchain, confined to the game. 1.5 is like no blockchain, but there's some agreed upon protocol, so you could sell your stuff in a third-party marketplace.
Okay, so we do, yeah. So we kind of, before blockchain came along, we've kind of gotten to level 1.5 with like a Steam marketplace where people are trading skins outside. Yep. Okay, and then we've got level 2, which is the ownership is verified on the blockchain. So this would be, you mentioned EOS Knights. So we've got objects that are that can be traded that are verified on the blockchain.
Yep.
Are there any other examples of kind of level 2 blockchain games that we're seeing right now as far as ownership goes?
I wouldn't say games. Well, I'm sure there are. I don't know of any games, but the all the sort of logistics cryptocurrencies that trace logistics, all they do is push hashes or push confirmations to the blockchain. So that's kind of the same thing, like VE chain or Walton chain.
Mm-hmm. So it's basically a chunk of digital information that you own, which is going back to that level 1 that's being pushed on okay. And then level 3, the controls adhere to a broadly accepted protocol, so digital objects can be sent to a third-party market. So this is where we're at right now. This is what DGoods, ICAM, Unico, Simple Assets are all trying to make this broadly accepted protocol, so that that we can have a marketplace where stuff's exchanged. And that's
right.
Okay.
Right. And just so users understand, at this level, what a developer does is they take a copy of the code, deploy it themselves, and then work from there.
Okay. So each developer is going to have a copy of the code they're working from. And this is in DGoods, ITAM, Unico, EOS, Simple Assets. Each of these teams is developing their own chunk of code, basically, and hoping that it becomes a larger standard. I talked to ITAM about this, and there's still I asked them, why are you developing your own set of codes when things like DGoods and Simple Assets are already out there? They mentioned a difference between NFTs and SFTs, I believe, or semi-fungible tokens and non-fungible tokens. And they had different ideas of how to move forward right there. Did you have any ideas on the difference between NFTs and SFTs and why one game would use those and not?
We decided not to deploy SFTs. Those are semi-fungible tokens.
Mm-hmm.
We think it's a trade-off between a lot of convoluted logic and saving on RAM a little bit, or economizing RAM. It might be a scale issue. Mm-hmm. So we think that creative use of NFTs and fungible tokens, non-fungible and fungible, solves all the use cases or almost all of the use cases, and semi-fungible tokens are not necessary. We don't know. It's early enough that this is a worthwhile experiment, so hats off to DGoods for pursuing it. That's the SFT thing. I think ITAM has a limited use case. They're a business, man. Like, you need to make money. So if you want to have, it's fine if you want to have your own in-game marketplace and, let's say, restrict other marketplaces from trading your stuff. I'm not sure that's what they're doing, but that's something that would be very hard for Simple Assets, because with Simple Assets, ownership is outside of your control, man. So once you give your asset to somebody, it's theirs. They can trade it all they want. They could trade it for EOS, for Bitcoin, for a ham sandwich. It is theirs.
Or just burn
it.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of businesses, a lot of game companies that are really, really have a very specific business model in mind, they may want a whitelist. So for those kind of companies, it's better for them to take a copy of one of these standards, say level 3 is enough because we want to restrict ownership, and just put it there.
Okay, so that's a good segue into level 4. This is where we're at right now, is making this decision basically. And level 4, you have as ownership and functionality is expressed entirely outside the control of the content creator. So talk a little bit about what exactly that means, why there's this difference between level 4 and level 3, because this is where we're at now.
Well, I'm worried that there's a misconception in the community that they think a digital asset issued by a self-deployed contract is as strong as a Bitcoin or an EOS token, and it's not. The issuer can update their contract and do whatever they want with the asset, pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah.
So essentially it's almost as the same as level 1. There's a misconception that blockchain is making this something different than level 1 digital assets, where whoever pushed the code yeah, that code's there until someone decides that they want to go change it. Either maliciously, they could go in and say, or not even maliciously, maybe the company changes directions and they need to change the code of the game to make it keep working. But that entails changing people's digital assets, or maybe the company goes out of business and they don't have RAM. They don't have, that's a more likely and less malicious. So we can use that. They go out of business, they don't have RAM anymore, and now your digital asset changes or isn't supported.
That's exactly it. So the alternative is to rely on a contract that's deployed externally. So, we'll support both. You could take simple assets and deploy it, as a couple of teams are already doing, or you can call our deployment of simple assets, and the updates to our deployment will be filtered by a multi-sig. EOS 42 will be part of the team. We're figuring out who else is going to be part of the team, and they're going to screen updates so nothing malicious will happen.
Okay. So let's say there is a multi-sig, and how many teams would be a part of that multi-sig?
I was kind of hoping to ask you that question. What's the right number?
It's because do we run into the same issue, but it's just less chance of it happening if let's say there's 3 teams controlling the code or a multi-sig wallet. Do we still run into this same conundrum of there's still this chance to change or update the code?
Yeah, I mean, the question is decentralized enough. It's the same question of, is 21 block producers the correct number? Mm-hmm. So same thing. We think we don't need 21 to update this contract code, but we're thinking somewhere in the range of like 3 to 11, which is a pretty broad range.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it seems like that could change over time too, because you say we start with 3. That makes a ton of sense now, because there's not a lot riding on it, let's say. But let's look down the road, 5-10 years, and if simple assets were adopted with a lot of video games, and all of a sudden maybe let's think that all of the money for video games was kind of flowing through, or all the NFTs were within simple assets. Now all of a sudden this could be a $1 billion asset, or $1 billion, it could be a very valuable chunk of code there. So then maybe 3 block producers isn't enough. Maybe then as it increases, you need to add more and more block producers to keep it. Yeah. So what's your idea of going down the road and how that looks?
Well, it is pretty much what you said. We're going to curate it ourselves due to the request of a game, and I'm not going to say which one, but you may have heard of it. We're deploying really soon, like next week or the following week.
Nice.
So it's going to be a long weekend just to test everything. And we'll curate it into existence ourselves. We'll sort of gauge interest, because the community is still figuring out what to do, and we'll grow from there. 42 will probably be our first partner, and we're talking to several others. And we do not yet know the correct number. Would love to hear from the community, so I'll certainly check out all the comments below this video.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear too. I mean, I think that just the idea of starting with this end goal in mind, where you want it to be basically a multi-sig wallet that grows over time, so that so that the incentives are aligned. Do you think the VRAM or the VRAM solution, or maybe, excuse me, sorry, I'm having a brain fart here, but block producers what's the VRAM platform again? Can you remind me of that?
Liquid dApps?
Yeah, because you think Liquid dApps comes into place here, where some teams of service providers may come together and provide, this may be one of the services that service providers do?
It's hard to see that. We're fans of the work with VRAM, but this is just another contract like the EOS.io token contract. It's just another contract. It doesn't use its own memory. You just interact with it to allocate memory between you and the person receiving the asset. So if there's sort of like a on high future for simple assets, it is becoming a system contract.
Okay, so that's kind of the big picture down the road as it becomes a system contract.
Because it's not resource intensive, so I'm not sure it's a match for the Liquid dApps project. It's just functionality.
The simple assets do not use RAM. The RAM use the authors who create the assets.
Okay.
Or the users.
You know, on the philosophical end here, you had some other ideas because you had the idea that maybe there's no game, and so if this code is living outside of some control, and it's controlled by a multi-sig wallet, and let's say there's 15 block producers at some time, and this is a huge, everyone's using the simple assets standard. There's this ability for people to create assets just with no game involved. What's your thought on that?
It already started in the jungle. People were creating assets and sending them back and forth as jokes.
No kidding. Okay.
Yeah. So it started. I think. All right. So there are some counter arguments to why you need an external authority. Like one of those counter arguments is sort of like, what's the point? If this object only works in my game and I, as the game creator, want to be malicious, like the asset will be broken anyway. But I think there's a really interesting future which none of us can fully anticipate, and like that could be items shared between games, or even the sort of authority to update an asset is shared between games, or the assets can live on if a game goes out of business. One of them is just playing with the asset functionality. Like we already have examples in our GitHub how anyone right now can create an asset in Jungle and just make it look cool. We have functionality. This is kind of cool. We just released this today. Functionality where you could put assets inside of assets. So you could have an asset box of asset flower pots of asset flowers. And like you could just send that stuff back and forth and like arrange the flowers differently. And this doesn't require any game. It's just manipulating these objects. And it's this kind of stuff that really sort of made us fall in love with this project. It just triggers so many imaginative possibilities. Flower arranging. You could have a flower arranging game without any game, just using the simple asset code.
Yeah, it starts to blur this line, which is always fun to think about, but this line between, technology within, like the line between human interaction and technology, when the lines start to disappear and we start to be able to use technology within computers the same as we do outside. So in the same way that I could create my own assets, I can create here. I can go grab a flower pot, put some dirt in it, put a flower in it, and then go give it to a friend. In the same way, now you can start to do these things within the blockchain, which is really cool. I mean, yeah, it does become this unlimited ability to interact, and it doesn't necessarily have to mean that everything's worth something, but just the ability to trade it around could open up so many doors.
Yeah, exactly. Like somebody created a sandal today, and it's not worth anything, but we got a good laugh. Like Bohdan called me over to his computer, we just laughed, and they sent this asset. It's a sandal.
Yeah, I mean that's funny. But then there could be these ones that for some reason someone hits on the perfect chord and they create something unique that does have value just out of nowhere, in the same way that in life we could create the perfect piece of art and all of a sudden you made the Mona Lisa, and it's very valuable out of nowhere. So do you think, I wonder what kind of, that's just kind of a fun thought experiment. I wonder what kind of things people might create that actually do have value out of thin air.
Yeah, there was an interesting article, I forget where, about the art marketplaces that right now still exist on Ethereum and are being built on EOS. And there were artists coming down on both sides. Like some say that you could just copy it. It's just this expression of ownership that you can't copy, but that expression is worthless because you could just copy the graphic. Others found it meaningful. And we don't know, like, we don't want to own the space. We just want to make this tool. It is free. Anybody can build a marketplace and try to profit from a marketplace. Anybody can build this front end for the creation and trading of art. You know, we as, you know, block producers are just trying to create value for the community and grow the community.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's good. You guys are always building things for the community and not trying to, you know, have some sort of control over it to monetize it and control it. So that I love that. Yeah. On the idea of art and whether, because you can copy it, whether it has value or not. I think that humans have proven that they care where an object comes from, even if it's the same. I mean, you just have to look as far as sporting memorabilia, and you know, there's thousands of baseballs out there, but that one baseball that this one guy hit during one game, you know, that someone caught, that's got so much more meaning. So
Very good example. Yeah.
Yeah. So so I think that it's entirely possible that people could create, you know, maybe that sandal as one of the first simple assets, you know, has some interesting value to someone someday, and they'll give you, you know, 10 EOS for it because it was one of the first, you know, simple assets traded on the, you know, platform. You know, you never know. You never know. People are sentimental and funny that way. So
yep.
Yeah. So you mentioned something about if a team wanted to be malicious and they broke the code on their end, that it could still kind of break an asset. Would that just be within that game? That asset would still survive on the blockchain. It just wouldn't have somewhere to live. Is that the thought there? How could they still break it?
All right. Well, let's talk about both possibilities. Let's talk about when you self-deploy and when you appeal to an external ownership authority. Okay. So if you self-deploy, you know, a lot of the asset is probably living on your servers, or is the actions of that asset live in a contract that you deployed to the mainnet, so you're paying for it for RAM. So if you go out of business, sell all your RAM, shut down your servers, the asset's gone. Other example, external authority, the game shuts down, the asset still exists, okay? Nobody can modify if it's simple assets. No, my prediction is that we'll all do this. D-Goods will continue to flatter us by copying us. ITAM will do this. Unico will do this. We'll all have external deployments, and we'll all also be deployable internally, okay? So external deployment, the game shuts down. Okay, so you can no longer modify the little chunk of the asset that was designated for you to be able to modify. The rest of it will live on. What does that mean? I don't know. Maybe it means nothing, and maybe there's no difference, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there will be a tribute game in the future to this old game that went out of business, and they'll import all the old assets. They just need to keep track of who owns them. So there you have it. That's the difference. We can't hear you.
We can hear you.
Oh, sorry about that. So let's say someone wants to go back and play a revised version of Doom 2 or something, and they go and they pull back all those old weapons, and they even put them into a new version or new Doom. You can use your old weapons or something.
Yeah.
I can see a lot of fun, even just for the nostalgia of going back and you know, grabbing some assets from some of your favorite games 10 or 15 years ago. Down the road, it might be fun to go back and pull old assets off the blockchain and utilize them. So,
or display them, like have a virtual shelf, all your old war trophies from all those battles.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I just started playing VR recently because it's just getting so so cool. And I don't know if you've played or not, but your home, you have basically a home, like a house where you have furniture and all your stuff, but it's, you can arrange it and put new things in there, and it's actually more interesting than I would have expected. Thinking about it at first, I was like, I don't care what my house looks like or what's in it. But once you start playing VR, it's like, no, I want a different couch in here. I want like a fish tank. All of a sudden you actually start, wanting stuff in your little, in your avatar house. So yeah, I could see grabbing a bunch of old stuff and putting it up in a virtual reality house for sure. That'd be really cool. So, wow. Yeah. So I think this level 4 where we're at right now is a really important thing for people to think about, whether we want to just kind of cede the control to video game developers like we have in the past. Because essentially to me, it seems like we're not that far past level 1. We are kind of at level. We can just almost revert back to level 1 here if there doesn't become some sort of simple assets type of standard.
Yeah, the difference between 1 and 3 is less than people think. It's transparency, mostly.
Yeah,
transparency, not just of the current ownership, but of the whole history of ownership, and that's significant. It's not as much as people think, but it's significant. And again, for a lot of games that want to self-deploy, I think it makes a lot of sense, especially now, especially games maybe they want to have a viable business. Maybe they want to whitelist marketplaces so they get a cut of all the transfers. Totally fine. I take no issue with companies or developers doing that. I just think the community should understand the certainty with which ownership of digital assets is expressed.
Yeah, right now it seems that, from what I've picked up, it seems that the game developers on their end are seeing, oh, this is a really cool tool, which it is, and they're implementing it from kind of the developer standpoint, but without the thought of bigger picture, the big community. And so it is important the community understands what's kind of on the line right now, like the difference between full transparency and a cool tool for developers to use to put things on the blockchain. But that full transparency is an important thing, and it opens up, and it takes some altruism on the end of the developers. There's not a huge benefit for them to deploy everything outside of their control. There's not a huge benefit there. They kind of have to do that because for the good of the system in general.
They may have to reimagine the business plan of their game, which is no small thing. If you've taken, a few million in investment, you're under a lot of pressure.
Yeah. What do you, so it does, that is one of the issues, is it removes kind of a possible revenue stream for some of these gaming companies. Do you see any creative revenue streams popping up because of, that are a bonus that come along with something like simple assets?
Well, it would have to matter. So like it would have to be worth something to say that the ownership authority of this game's assets is this multi-sig or that multi-sig. I don't think that we'll be the only one. So if that matters, if people care enough, then games will do that, and they'll make money by issuing assets. Remember, it's no small thing to issue assets. They just can't get a cut of all the trades. So, or selling starter packs, which might happen soon.
Well, yeah, if there's this general understanding in the community that one asset issued is going to be there forever, and is resilient in the same way that something like EOS or Bitcoin is, then there should be an inherent value with that. If there's the understanding in the community that another asset is going to be controlled down the road by, it's going to basically hinge on a game company surviving forever, then that should have a different value in people's mind, in the same way that cryptocurrency does or doesn't have value. So I think maybe getting just people being educated enough to understand the difference will because if a game company is wanting to issue and sell assets, they should be worth more if they are open source and will survive forever, basically.
Well, thank you for helping us get the word out.
Absolutely. Did you guys have anything else to kind of add here, or anything else that you wanted to talk about as far as Crypto Lions goes and what you guys are working on? Or is it all simple assets?
Oh, this isn't even close to everything, but maybe for now it's enough. Simple assets, we let you, and this since February, it's been working. Renting assets, we designate part of the asset that the author can modify and the part of it that's frozen forever. We do offer claim, so instead of transferring, you can offer it. That doesn't seem like a big difference, but it changes whose memory gets used, so it is a big deal. If you're careless, you can end up using a lot of your own memory. We do batch processing, so you could send a whole bunch of assets at the same time. We introduced event notifications so that authors get to know what happens to their assets when they're outside of their control. That's really cool for developers.
How would that play? How would that feature be used?
We use deferred transaction, and when action is created, the author is notified by this deferred transaction just in the next block, so it's almost immediately.
It wasn't easy to implement. We tried 3 different ways technically to do it. Why might that be used? I don't know. I think a game might want to know if assets have been transferred, or burned or anything else. I'm sure there are use cases. I don't know what they are. I want other people to bring their creativity and show me what those use cases are. Yeah, and today we introduced containerizing, you could have an asset wallet filled with fungible tokens or non-fungible tokens. Yeah, so it's so much fun. We think it's fun. We hope other people think it's fun as well and build cool stuff.
You know, an interesting, just brainstorming about being notified, say there was like 100 swords in a game, some art role-playing game, but you could break swords. And so, as people use and break these kind of rare swords, maybe you get a notification that one of these swords has disappeared from the ecosystem. Now you have one of 99. And there could be some kind of interesting gaming, a gameplay there of like how long people use swords but keep them intact as well, and they can kind of gain value if a sword is been used for 2 years and hasn't been broken. There's only 3 of them left. There's some interesting dynamics there of keeping track of things on the blockchain too.
Yeah, or put the history of an item, like this item was used in this famous battle.
Mm-hmm.
Like the game Eve, when we were doing simple assets, I researched a lot of games that have prominent economies, and one of the biggest ones, which I'd never heard of before, surprisingly, is Eve, sort of a space exploration game. Like they have their own history. They know that the second biggest battle in the 15-year history of the game happened in 2014. Over $100,000 of in-game items were destroyed during that battle.
No kidding.
And then they had the biggest battle fairly recently, the biggest ever, with like thousands of players and their ships that they spent years and years building. So yeah, like tracking a ship that played a crucial role in a key battle, really cool functionality. Eve, by the way, pulls this all off without blockchain. So just the reputation of the company is enough to support this many $100,000, maybe $1 million asset marketplace, which is why we don't necessarily need level 4, but I want the community to understand the difference of who controls ownership, because not all game companies have that kind of reputation. Yeah,
absolutely. And it'll give players the confidence to play, let's say, newer games. Let's say there's a cool game, but it doesn't have the reputation that Eve has. Before people are comfortable putting that much into something like Eve, I'm sure that there's some sort of network effect where it's been around long enough and it's got enough people playing where now all of a sudden people trust it. Whereas a new game could come out, and if it was using simple assets, then you just know you can kind of trust it off from earlier, let's say. So Yeah, so go ahead. Did you have a couple other things as far as simple assets? I think you were about to go on to one more thing before I interrupted you with that thing there.
I think that's most of it. We delegate functionality where you could rent assets. But yeah, it's still early. I guess the general message is just check out the GitHub, check out our Telegram.
Yeah, we're trying to create a lot of examples to show how to use it easily. We created some small, simple game, a Colobox game, which uses simple assets and like this small breeding game. When you can breed own Colobok, it will be simple, non-fungible token also, and then sell it on the market.
Did you say where you can breed what? What we?
There's a East European version of the Gingerbread Man fairy tale.
Okay.
It's called Colobok. So we made an example game we put a lot of effort into documentation to help developers, and part of that effort was making an example game that issues assets interact, and it's a breeding game, kind of a CryptoKitties clone with its own little nuances.
Cool. I mean, those things actually take off surprisingly sometimes when people, gain some interest. Those things take off. I mean, CryptoKitties was a phenomenon. So, yeah, cool. So you mentioned renting assets. Is that are you talking about renting down the line, like renting a good weapon or renting things just for a few games and then returning them to the owner?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, so that functionality has been there. Chintai, as you can imagine, was thrilled to hear that. What simple assets does is just you delegate the item to somebody you can guarantee a period of time if you'd like, and then it returns to you, and it just manages all that. Chintai can add economics to this and make like a market for borrowing and different rates and stuff like that.
Wow. Man, I just the amount of ideas that are possible here. Again, that blurring the line between the digital world and the real world of not only being able to just kind of create assets out of thin air, whatever you would like, but then being able to rent them or loan them out even to people is just so cool. So cool.
Yeah.
Well, fantastic. I appreciate you guys coming on the show, and I think that this will give people a better understanding of the difference, the 4 levels of digital assets. We're at level 3, and why level 4 is so important. Again, level 4, the ownership and functionality is expressed entirely outside of the control of the content creator. Level 4 is important, and that's where we're at. So appreciate you guys coming on the show and talking about that. And I'll link your article. It's called Digital Assets. We need to think about ownership authority. Your Medium article, I'll link that in the show notes. So if anyone wants to read up on what we talked about here, they can do that. Did Bohdan or Roman, do you guys have closing thoughts here for us?
Thank you for all that you do for the community. We're big fans.
And thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you guys as well. You guys are doing big things over there. On my end, the EOS podcast, I have the Mr. Happy Money Proxy. If you're looking to vote for Proxy, block producers through a proxy, I vote for Crypto Lions because they're one of the teams that are doing big projects like this that are really important to the community. So my vote goes for Crypto Lions and other block producers that are transparent, empowering the community, and building together. I think you guys are a great example of all 3 of those things that my proxy votes for. As far as, the empowerment is giving these tools to the community for the good of the community. I think that's fantastic. So thank you guys for that. And that's the show today, my EOS podcast friends. So cheers until next time, and great having you on, Bohdan, and great having you on, Roman. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
The money is not the prime asset in life. Time is, and your time is just